When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. He scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little even then. Scrooge went to bed again, and thought, over and over. Scrooge lay in this state until the chime had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered, on the sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour had passed, and, considering that he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was, perhaps, the wisest resolution in his power.
The hour itself, and nothing else.
He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did, with a deep and melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside by a hand. Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. It wore a tunic of the purest white.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me? Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past. Take heed, rise, and walk with me.
The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his rose in supplication.
I am mortal, and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand there, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day, with snow upon the ground.
Good heavens! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
The spirit gazed upon him mildly. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
It's just a spot.
You recollect the way?
Remember it? I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and its winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs. All these boys were in great spirits, and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
Look, there's Henry and Albert and young George.
These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us.
Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard each of them give each other a Merry Christmas?
The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made bare still by the lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. Not a leaden echo in the house, not a clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Scrooge with a softening influence and gave a freer passage to his tears.
What is the matter?
No, nothing. There was a boy singing a...
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in and put her arms about his neck.
Dear brother, I've come to bring you home, dear brother. To bring you home.
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home for good and all, forever and ever. Father's so much kinder than he used to be. Home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed, I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said yes. And he sent me with a coach to bring you. And you're never to come back here. But first we're to be together at Christmas and have the merriest time in all the world.
Little Fan! Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he accompanied her.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered. But she had a large heart.
And so she had. You're right. I will not gainsay it, Spirit. God forbid.
She died a woman, and had, as I think, children.
One child.
True. Your nephew.
Yes.
Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, and all the strife and tumult of a city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas once again. But it was evening, and the streets were lit up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door.
Do you know this place?
Know it? I was apprentice here. Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, Fezziwig alive again.
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up upon the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7.
Yo-ho there! Ebenezer! Dick!
Scrooge's former self, now a grown young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, yes. There he is. Dear, dear.
Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight. It's Christmas Eve. Let's have the shutters up.
You wouldn't believe how those two fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters 1, 2, 3, and came back before you have gotten to 12, panting like racehorses.
Hilly-ho! Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots more room here.
Clear away? There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away, with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. In came a fiddler with a music book, and went up to the lofty desk, and made an orchestra of it. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile.
Happy Christmas, Mr. Fezziwig. Happy Christmas, Dick. Happy Christmas, Ebenezer. Happy Christmas, everyone!
In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In they all came, the whole town, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully and some awkwardly, some pushing and some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. She was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as she or he went out, wishing him or her a Merry Christmas. When everyone had retired but the 2 apprentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything. And it wasn't until now that he remembered the ghost, while the light upon his head burnt very clear.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
The spirit signed to him to listen to the two apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig.
Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. 3 or 4, perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our services light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great if it costs a fortune.
He felt the spirit's glance, and he stopped.
What is the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No. I should just like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air.
My time grows short. Quick!
Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light of the ghost of Christmas past.
It matters little to you. Very little. Another idol has displaced me. And if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on it which is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn as such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off, one by one. Greed engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you, am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until in good season we could improve our worldly fortune. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you you are not what you are. It is enough that I have thought of it, and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no. Never.
In what then?
In a changed nature. In an altered spirit. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?
You think not.
I would gladly think otherwise if I could. I release you. With a full heart, for the love of him you once were. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Take me home.
Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon his head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light. He was conscious of being exhausted, and was overcome by an irresistible drowsiness until he was fast asleep.